Archie Hamilton, a legend of the past, a sniper who knew the price of every bullet. Now he's just an old man in a forgotten town called Rocky Bluff. But the past never lets go. They came with roaring engines and a thirst for destruction. The Bone Ravens, a ruthless biker gang led by the cold-blooded Rick Grim Dance. Their goal? To take control and enforce their own law. As the streets descend into chaos and fear grips the townspeople, Archie knows there's nowhere left to run. He picks up his old rifle and steps into the fight. The first gunshot shatters the silence. This is no longer resistance, it's war. A town in flames, betrayal, revenge, and one last stand for home. Can an old warrior become a legend once more, or is this his final battle? Stay with us to find out how this story ends. And don't forget to subscribe, the real action is just beginning. In the vast expanses of the southwestern United States, where dusty roads cut through rugged landscapes, lies the small town of Rocky Bluff, a place where time seems to stand still and the hot sun rises each morning over lonely hills, illuminating a world filled with forgotten stories and quiet tragedies. It was here that Archie Hamilton lived, an elderly man with deep wrinkles that showed years of struggle, loss, and endless memories of past exploits. In his youth, Archie was a legend. His accuracy and coolness made him the best sniper in the entire army, and his name echoed in the remotest corners of the front. However, time is inexorable, and now, left alone with his demons, Archie preferred solitude and tranquility, living in an old wooden house on the outskirts of the town, where every sunset reminded him of those days when life seemed bright and risk was a familiar companion. This dawn was different. While most of the people of Rocky Bluff were waking to the sounds of silence and dusty wind, Archie was already sitting on the veranda of his house, watching the first rays of the sun paint the sky in crimson and orange tones. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the desert merged with the sky, and his thoughts wandered between past battles and the present silence. Despite the peace, a struggle raged within him. Memories of service and endless hours spent in ambush returned like shadows of the past, reminding him that even the best soldiers cannot hide from fate. But on this day, something disrupted the usual rhythm of life. Rocky Cliff, which had always been a quiet and almost forgotten town, became the arena for events that could turn the usual way of life upside down. In the narrow streets, between lonely houses and empty parking lots, the first signs of an approaching threat appeared. A group of bikers on black motorcycles with the roar of engines, like menacing animals, crashed into the morning silence, challenging the tranquility of the town. Various symbols were written on their skin, and their eyes were full of cruel intent. These people were known as the Bone Crows, a gang that brought terror to the surrounding settlements with their ruthlessness and penchant for violence. Their leader was Rick Grim Dance, a man with an icy gaze and a scar across his right cheek, a symbol of his many fights and losses. As the roar of the engines broke the morning idyll, Archie, sitting on the veranda, instantly felt his instincts, honed by years of service, awaken again. He slowly lowered his favorite rifle, carefully carved from wood and metal, with which he once achieved incredible accuracy, and peered into the distance. Pictures from the past emerged in his memory, endless hours of observation of the enemy, cold calculation, every shot, every mistake that could cost the lives of comrades. But now, in these quiet morning hours, Archie understood. His city, his home, was now under threat, and the past, no matter how cruel it was calling him to fight again. Archie rose from the porch, slowly, as if trying not to disturb the peace of awakening nature, but with the firmness that was his custom on the battlefield. His steps, though feeble with age, sounded with the confidence of a veteran who knows that every moment can be decisive. He headed for the small garage where his old car was stored, a rusty pickup that, despite the years, was still a reliable companion. The interior smelled of leather and old grease, and the lights on the dashboard flickered, as if reminding him of the times when time was the enemy and life was a fight for every second. Without wasting a minute, Archie drove out onto the streets of Rocky Bluff. His truck, the engine vibrating, accelerated along the dusty road, and the old man's eyes carefully studied what was happening. He saw how bikers, defying law and order with a flourish, destroyed store windows and scared passers-by. Every movement, every roar of engines made Archie remember how he himself once took part in operations where the lives of many people were at stake. But now his task was different: to protect his hometown, where he spent his entire life, and which had become for him a symbol of all those lost days when honor and duty were above all else. Archie knew that one against many was almost a certain death sentence, but his soul, hardened by years of service, could not accept the fact that his city could be captured by such ruthless bandits. He understood that he would have to act cunningly and carefully, using his experience and skill as a sniper to strike at the very heart of the enemy force. And although age no longer allowed him to perform such maneuvers as in his youth, the ability to observe, analyze the situation, and make instant decisions remained with him forever. Along the way, Archie passed small houses where the inhabitants, already hiding behind curtains, watched the events with anxiety. A mixture of fear and hope was written on the faces of the people. Hope that this silent warrior, once known as the best sniper, would be able to defend again. In his eyes, full of memories and pain, flashes of past victories flickered. And despite his fatigue, he knew that today his duty was not only to remember the past, but also to protect the future. Inside the abandoned building, Archie set up his impromptu ambush. He positioned himself on the top floor, where he had a commanding view of the main streets of Rocky Bluff. From his hiding place, he watched the approaching gang carefully, counting the distance and studying their disposition. He remembered the lessons he had learned in distant lands and on barren battlefields, where every shot was an art and every second was worth its weight in gold. He knew that time would be his ally, as it always was. In those moments, when the city held its breath, Archie took aim and prepared for the first shot. His hands, covered with scars and wrinkles, trembled with memories, but they were confident, proven by years of service. He took a deep breath, concentrated, and as if through the silence of the past decades, his gaze froze on one of the bikers who, according to his calculations, was the key figure in the attack. With a squeeze of the trigger, a single but decisive sound was heard, a shot that echoed through the streets of the town and became the first signal of the beginning of the resistance. The sound of a shot cut through the silence like lightning, and fear flashed across the faces of the attackers. Some bikers immediately stopped moving, realizing that a deadly enemy had appeared in their ranks. Others, unaccustomed to such an unexpected blow, froze for a moment, giving Archie a chance to assess the situation. He was in no hurry. His experience told him that one shot could change the course of a battle, but the main thing was to maintain control of the situation. Thus began a new dawn for Rocky Bluff, a morning when an old legend stood up to defend his hometown, when the memory of past deeds became a force capable of withstanding the fury of time. On this day, Archie Hamilton once again proved that even the most wounded souls can revive and light a light of hope if the flame of honor and duty burns within them. His determination, tempered by years of service and countless trials, became a symbol of the fact that freedom and justice are inalienable values worth fighting for until the last breath. As the first citizens of Rocky Bluff gathered to discuss what had happened, the muffled roar of engines could already be heard in the distance, a harbinger that the war for the town was only just beginning. But now, armed not only with fear but also with faith in the power of truth, the people knew that if the old sniper, once renowned for his impeccable marksmanship, could become a living shield for their hometown, then nothing could crush their unity and determination. And in this morning glow, when the world had not yet realized the full force of the awakening struggle, Rocky Bluff found a new defender, ready to fight again to preserve the light of eternal freedom. After the first decisive shot broke the early morning silence, the town of Rocky Bluff was plunged into chaos. In the distant mountains, where the wind carried the dust of ancient times, the noise of engines and the shouts of bikers gradually gave way to the sounds of anxious discussion among the locals. Archie Hamilton, who had just fired the first shot from his old but reliable sniper rifle, stood in the shadow of the abandoned building where he had set up his ambush. His haggard but determined face expressed not only the pain of years lived, but also that fighting spark that does not fade even in the oldest warriors. Without a moment to lose, Archie made a decision. Before engaging in open combat, he must secure a foothold for resistance in Rocky Bluff. The old telephone line, covered with the dust of time, rang on his landline in the house, and the voice of Henry Collins, an old friend and comrade, rang out at the moment when Archie was about to leave his ambush. "Archie, do you hear me? The gang is already gathering strength, and we must get together immediately. I have already contacted several local veterans and active citizens. Your shot is the signal. We must combine our forces, or the city will soon be at the mercy of these scoundrels, Henry said, conveying his determination through the noise of the line. Archie knew deep down that Henry was right. He put down his weapon, took cover behind an old concrete wall, and without wasting a minute, headed towards the house where the first resistance group was gathering. His steps, although not as fast as in his youth, carried the same confidence, tested by years of battle. Along the way, he met people, old friends, acquaintances, even strangers, whose looks expressed anxiety and hope at the same time. Everyone, seeing Archie, seemed to sense the presence of a legend, a man who in his time saved lives and became a symbol of courage. The first citizens had already begun to gather in the city center. In a small but cozy cafe on the main street, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the smell of dust and gasoline, locals were talking about what had happened. Some said they had seen bikers destroying shop windows, some claimed to have heard abrupt orders on the radio, and some told of an unknown sound of a gunshot that made their hearts stop. In this hectic conversation, Archie, passing by, heard people expressing hope. "There he is, Archie Hamilton. He has come to protect our city." Archie's words, with the power of years, were the spark that ignited the flames of resistance. The people gathered in the hall exchanged looks of determination and pain, realizing that their fight was not just to protect their homes, but to protect the very spirit of their homeland. There were those who remembered their losses, the friends who would never return, but also those who were determined to fight back against the threat that had invaded their lives. While plans were being discussed, the first clashes continued in the city center. In the streets, where the noise of engines mixed with the shouts and sounds of battle, the bikers tried to gain a foothold and establish control over key points. Rick Grim Dance, who led the gang, gave another order with his characteristic cruelty. "Accelerate, brothers. Show these old men that our order is not subject to discussion." The leader's voice made the hearts of his subordinates tremble, and the group, as if united into a single deadly mechanism, began an offensive towards the center. Archie, watching through the small window of the warehouse, knew that the decisive phase was approaching. He remembered his years, when every second on the battlefield could be the difference between life and death. His gaze focused, and his mind began to formulate a plan of action. He knew that organized resistance, even if it consisted of a few, could hold back the enemy's onslaught if it acted quickly and in a coordinated manner. "We must fight back," he muttered quietly. "We must show that even old age is not an excuse to retreat." Archie's signal spread through the streets, and a wave of resistance rolled over the attackers. People, inspired by the old man's courage, began to run out of their houses, helping those who were already trapped. At this moment, former soldiers, veterans, and even young residents appeared on the front lines, deciding that their fate could not be left to their own devices. With each new shot, with each clash, the city came alive. And even in the heat of battle, words of support were heard, filled with faith in a brighter future. The battle continued for hours, with the battle lines constantly shifting. The bikers, forced to retreat from Archie's precise fire and the defenders' coordinated attacks, were slowly losing their strength and organization. Rick Grim Dance, seeing his gang beginning to disintegrate, gave his final orders, but their voices were lost in the chaos of the fighting. At that moment, Archie, watching from the elevated position, realized that this was only the beginning of a long struggle. He knew that the biker gangs would not stop at one blow and that there would be many more clashes to come, but today the city had a chance to regain control of its destiny. As the first biker groups finally retreated, Archie descended from the hill and headed to the center of the defenders' meeting. In the basement of an old warehouse, where people were already exchanging stories and plans for the future, he said a few words that everyone remembered. "We have proven today that even one man, armed not only with weapons but also with faith, is capable of fighting back the darkness. But our fight is not over yet. We must unite, regain control of the streets, and protect our home from those who wish only to bring destruction." Archie's words, spoken with wisdom and determination, marked the beginning of a new phase of resistance in Rocky Bluff. Meanwhile, in Rocky Cliff, the first steps to restore the destroyed infrastructure began. Citizens, united by a common goal, began to fix broken windows, sweep the streets, and help each other in difficult times. With each passing day, the city was increasingly returning to life, and there was hope in the air that together they could build a future free of violence and terror. Archie, despite his fatigue and the scars of past battles, continued to observe the situation with unwavering attention. His experience told him that the enemy would not give in so easily, and that a new danger might lurk around the next corner. He often spent hours alone, sitting on the veranda of his home, thinking about how the past had shaped the present and what the path to peace might be. His thoughts would recall distant battles, nights when every shot was a step toward victory, and quiet moments when he could simply enjoy the silence. Every day the resistance grew stronger. Henry and other veterans organized meetings where they discussed tactics and strategies, tested combat skills, analyzed mistakes. Archie shared his experience, talking about the importance of keeping a cool head even in the most tense situations. His words, full of life wisdom, inspired new fighters, and even those who had never held a weapon in their hands began to realize their responsibility for the fate of the city. The dust and heat of the deserted roads, stretching between lonely cliffs and abandoned settlements, continued to carry their silent tale of a time when Craggy Crag was a quiet corner of the world. But that day, everything changed. After Archie Hamilton led the resistance, his shot echoing in the morning silence became a symbol of awakening and determination of the inhabitants. Now the town was at a crossroads, and everyone's fate depended on how determined the defenders would be. As the sun set on the second day after his first encounter with the Bone Crows, as Rocky Crag began to recover from the initial blows, Archie could not sit still. He felt his old heart, filled with memories of past victories and lost friends, kindle anew as scenes from his youth came to mind. The days when he had been the best marksman, when every shot had determined the outcome of a battle. These images gave him strength, reminding him that even if the years took away physical strength, skill and will remained eternal. Archie knew the fight against the bikers was just beginning. His experience told him that the Bone Crows wouldn't stop at one blow. They would come back, carry out new raids, and then the defenders would have to act even more harshly. So he decided to conduct reconnaissance along the deserted roads leading to the outskirts of the town, where enemy movements were rumored to have been noticed. The old model of the pickup truck, which had served him faithfully for many years, creaked quietly under the weight of memories and hopes. The engine hummed smoothly, as if responding to the call of the past, and Archie, without wasting a minute, headed towards the abandoned road, where, as he knew, traces of the recent presence of bikers could be found. As the group of bikers approached, Archie took cover behind a large boulder on the side of the road and watched intently. His gaze swept over the bikers' faces, trying to take in every detail. Some seemed more aggressive, others seemed hesitant. Images from his service surfaced in his mind as he analyzed the enemy's behavior, identifying their weak points. Today, he used the same methods, meticulously recording every detail so he could pass the information on to his allies in town. Soon, one of the bikers, the leader of the small group, broke away from the main stream and stopped at the side of the road, as if deciding to survey the area. His cautious glance, directed in the direction where Archie was hiding in the shadows, made the old man tensely grip the handle of his gun. He realized that this man could be a scout, sent to identify weak points in the defense. Archie made a decision. The fate of Rocky Bluff could depend on this shot. He took aim slowly, almost soundlessly. The memory of his undeniable accuracy flashed in his mind, and taking a deep breath, he pulled the trigger. The shot, accurate and fast, broke the silence of the deserted road, echoing around the neighborhood and causing the group of bikers to stop. The sound of the gunshot sent chaos through the enemy ranks. The scout leader looked around in panic. His comrades froze, and then fear seemed to flash in their eyes. Archie watched from the shadows, his heart beating in time with the dust blown by the wind. This first strike was not only a signal to his allies, but also a warning sign for the Bone Ravens. He knew that now they would know for sure that there was someone in Craggy Crag who was ready to fight back, and that could change the course of the coming battle. Over the next few hours, the defense of Rocky Bluff began to be organized. Meetings in open spaces, the central square, and near local schools became places for exchanging information, where veterans and locals discussed tactics and assigned tasks. Archie, though feeling the weight of his years, was an active participant in the planning. His experience and cold calculation gave him the ability to see the enemy's weak points and offer creative solutions. He talked about the importance of using the terrain, how to hide behind old buildings, how to set up an ambush, and how to act quickly when the enemy advanced. The night gradually gave way to dawn, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the streets, which still bore traces of the recent struggle. The bikers, weakened by the first blow and the chaos that followed, retreated, trying to regroup. But the resistance was gaining momentum. People, inspired by Archie's courage, began to actively resist the enemy, running out into the streets, helping each other, organizing small ambushes and reporting on the movements of the enemy. Archie, still on the front lines of the resistance, felt his heart swell with pride for his hometown. He saw how his shot had awakened the determination in people, how every look, every word, was the desire to protect their home. He took aim again, watching another group of bikers trying to break through a narrow alley. Scenes from the past emerged in his mind, moments when, as a young sniper, he had withstood the most intense fire, when every shot could change the course of the battle. Now these memories served as a support and inspiration for new actions. Meanwhile, in Rocky Bluff, the conversations and plans for the future continued. In the streets, where people were still clearing the traces of recent fighting, residents expressed gratitude for the courage shown, and old men told stories of old times when the town stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of adversity. Henry Collins, always ready to support morale, insisted that this fight was only the beginning of a long struggle, and that only unity could bring victory. "We will not allow these infidels to destroy all that we have built up over the years," he said. "Today we will stand up for our homes, our children, and the future of our town." Archie, after the battle was over, returned several times to the place where it all began to comprehend what had happened. He sat on the ruins of an old wall, gazing at the horizon, where dust and morning light merged into a single symphony. His thoughts were full of memories of the past, of those days when he was younger and stronger, when every mission ended in victory or tragedy, but always with a lesson. He understood that the fight for Rocky Bluff was not just a personal battle, but a fight for the soul of his native land, for its honor and for the freedom of each resident. Over the next few hours, as the sun rose higher, the city slowly returned to normal. Under cover of the morning bustle, people began to go about their daily business, discussing plans to rebuild the ruined houses and streets, organizing patrols and defense groups. But in every corner, in every glance, there was a sense that the war was not yet over, that evil might return if there was not continued vigilance. Archie, sitting in the shade of an old oak tree at the edge of the square, watched the proceedings. His eyes, full of wisdom and years, shone with a quiet joy when he saw that people were regaining hope. But new worries raged inside him. He knew that the bone crows would not disappear forever, that evil was always looking for an opportunity to return, to sow chaos and destruction once again. And that is why he swore to himself that he would be vigilant until the last day, that his soul, hardened by the years, would always be ready to fight back against those who dared to disturb the peace of his hometown. The desert, the vast expanses of rocky plains, the dust raised by the wind and the sounds of an approaching thunderstorm, all this created an atmosphere in which time seemed to stand still and the fate of Rocky Bluff hung in the balance. After Archie Hamilton had made 2 decisive shots that had shaken the ranks of the bikers, the town was experiencing its first days of fierce resistance. But the enemy, led by the brutal Rick Grimm Dance, was not going to give up easily. He knew that the initial attack had failed, and his gang had to respond with redoubled efforts. At this decisive moment of the offensive, on the deserted roads, between lonely rocks and abandoned buildings, a new phase of the confrontation began, in which every second mattered and every detail could be decisive. Archie, still in the thick of things, was returning to town with the intelligence he had gathered from watching the bone ravens move along the deserted roads. His old pickup truck, making its way along the narrow country roads, seemed the only link between the past, when he was a young and fearless sniper, and the present, in which he had to take his fate into his own hands again. He remembered how in those days when he served, every minute was filled with fear and adrenaline, and now, despite the gray hair and wrinkles, his soul burned with an unquenchable flame of courage and determination. Archie's words became a manifesto for everyone present, filling them with energy and a will to win. While plans were being discussed at headquarters, new clashes were breaking out on the streets of Rocky Bluff. Bikers, led by Rick Grim Dance, were trying to penetrate the center of the town, where the local police were already trying to organize a defense. The rumble of motorcycles, the roar of engines, and the shouts of opponents mixed with the voices of residents who, not expecting such a turn of events, suddenly found themselves forced to defend their homes. Rick, sitting on his black bike, gave orders to his men through the radio. "Forward! Show these old men that our order is the law." His voice, rough and commanding, sounded throughout the area, causing confusion in the ranks of the resistance. At one critical moment in the battle, when the conflict unfolded on the main street, Archie, standing on the hill of the abandoned gate of an old mansion, carefully watched the enemy's movements. His gaze, cold and penetrating, scanned the ranks of the advancing bikers, trying to identify weak points in their formation. He remembered how in the past, as a young sniper, he knew how to anticipate the enemy's movements, and now this gift was returning to him again. His hand did not tremble as he fired another shot, hitting a target that seemed to be responsible for coordinating the gang's movements. The shot, as accurate as the previous ones, made the enemies freeze, and fear flashed in their eyes. This moment was a turning point. In the chaos of the battle, the defenders of Rocky Bluff were able to strengthen their position and delay the enemy's onslaught. After this decisive blow, Archie hurried to headquarters to pass on the information he had gathered to Henry Collins. He knew that every second counted, and that the fate of many lives would be decided in the coming minutes. In the tensely silent corridors of the warehouse, he exchanged data with other fighters, recorded coordinates, and assigned tasks. At that moment, footage from the streets appeared on the screen of an old TV connected to the surveillance system, showing how the enemy was retreating in panic and the defenders were organizing defensive lines. Meanwhile, in the town of Scalisty UTs itself, after the first successful attacks by the defenders, residents began to unite in groups to restore order and help those who suffered in the fighting. Volunteers with tools appeared on the streets, people repaired broken shop windows, and old-timers told young people stories about how their town survived wars and was restored. These moments of unity became a symbol of hope for many, proof that even in the hardest times, people can stand up and defend their home. Archie kept in touch with Henry Collins and the other resistance leaders. They discussed how best to distribute their forces, where to send reinforcements, which positions to fortify first. Every signal received, every coordinate transmitted was of great importance in conditions when the enemy could strike at any second. "We must be one step ahead," Archie said, "and act with cold precision. My experience tells me that if we organize our defenses correctly, the bikers will not be able to regroup and deliver a decisive blow." As night approached, Rocky Crag once again fell into a tense silence. Patrols roamed the streets under lanterns, and residents hid in their houses, listening for any sound, fearing further clashes. Meanwhile, Archie went out to scout again. His duty was not only to repel the enemy, but also to constantly be aware of what was happening. He walked slowly through the streets, his eyes scanning every corner. Every shadow seemed suspicious to him. His thoughts were full of memories of the past, of the days when he himself walked such streets. But now these streets were his home, for which he was ready to give everything. As night fell and darkness enveloped the town, the resistance headquarters once again assumed an air of tense anticipation. All the forces gathered for the defense continued to keep vigil, discussing the latest news and preparing for a possible new enemy offensive. Archie, sitting at an old wooden table covered with maps, notebooks, and photographs of the battles, reflected on how the future of Rocky Bluff depended on their unity and how willing they were to learn from the mistakes of the past. He understood that time was inexorable and that every minute could be decisive in the fight for freedom. In the quiet of the headquarters, the quiet conversations of veterans could be heard, discussing plans for the future. Henry Collins, an old friend of Archie, quietly remarked, "We must be prepared for evil to return. But before it comes, we must do everything possible to prepare our city for another blow. We must train the young, strengthen our defenses, and remember that each of us is a guardian of this land." These words, spoken with pain of loss and hope for the future, found a response in the hearts of all present. Archie stood up, his eyes shining with determination. He walked over to the map spread out on the table and pointed to several key areas. These streets, these intersections, we need to increase patrols here. These are the places where the bikers might try to break through to the center. We need to be ready. If the enemy returns, our response will be swift." His voice, though quiet, carried such power that it made every listener feel the weight of the fight ahead. Archie, returning to his home after the afternoon meetings, stopped again on the veranda where he once spent long hours in thought. He looked at the desert, at the mountains, at the city, and his thoughts were full of memories of the past, of those days when he was younger, when every mission was a fight for life, when his shots brought victories and saved lives. But now, in middle age, his duty was different: to protect his hometown from the evil that was trying to destroy everything he loved so dearly. He said quietly, "We are not finished yet. Evil does not sleep, and I must be ready to fight back at any moment. Our city is our land, and we will defend it until our last breath." These words, spoken to himself, filled his heart with new energy and determination, and he understood that there was still a long way ahead, full of trials, but also victories, if the people stick together. The fight for Rocky Bluff was over, but the battle continued. Old Sniper Archie, driven by an undying will and years of experience, became a symbol of how even when strength seems exhausted, a spirit tempered by life and battle can withstand any challenge. His shots, his words, and his presence inspired new fighters, making them believe that evil, no matter how powerful it may seem, cannot defeat the unity and determination of a people united by love for their native land. On this day, Rocky Cliff began to build its future again. With each step, with each meeting, with each new patrol, the residents and defenders of the city proved that freedom and honor are worth any sacrifice. And while the sun slowly rose over the desert, old Archie knew his duty was not over. He would continue to stand guard over his hometown, ready to repel anyone who dared to disturb the peace, and to pass on his experience to those who were just beginning their path in the fight for freedom. On the main street, where not long ago the roar of engines and shouts of bikers made hearts beat faster, people began to gather. Locals, young and old, with anxiety, but also with hope, came out of their houses. Some hid behind the crooked signs of shops, others already organized their small groups for mutual support. Here, in this chaotic mixture of fears and expectations, a new idea was born, the idea of unification. On the corner of the main street there was already a poster, written by the hand of one of the volunteers, where in large letters it was written, "Rocky Cliff, our home, our strength, our hope." These words, simple but heartfelt, became a slogan that echoed through the streets and in the hearts of everyone who saw them. At this time, in the basement of the old warehouse that served as the resistance headquarters, an emergency meeting was held. Henry Collins, an old friend of Archie's, was already discussing plans with a group of veterans and activists. In the dim light of the lamps on the yellowed maps and photographs of the town, the faces of those present reflected both the pain of loss and the determination to move forward. Archie entered the room, and the silence, broken only by the rustle of turning pages and quiet discussions, was filled with respectful silence. The old man, with a sparkle in his eyes, whom everyone knew as a symbol of courage and experience, stood up and, slightly adjusting his old glasses, spoke. "Friends, today we see the dawn of not only a new day, but a new beginning for Rocky Bluff. I have lived a long life, seen much and lost much, but I have never doubted that our city can withstand any storm. We have proven today that even one shot, one decisive act, can ignite the hearts of people and give them strength to fight. But our mission does not end here. We must restore order, help those who have suffered, and above all, teach the young that freedom and honor are worth any sacrifice. We must be united as one family, because only together can we build a future in which there is no place for tyranny and violence." Archie, a true protector and teacher, spent hours talking to the youth. He sat on a bench near the local park, where under the shade of a lone oak tree, his wrinkled face reflected not only the pain of loss, but also the light of experience. Young fighters, who had heard stories of his exploits many times, listened to him as if they were listening to a living legend. "Remember," he said, "each of you can become the protector of your home. It does not matter how old you are or how young you are. The main thing is faith, determination, and the readiness to act when the time comes." These words, simple and sincere, left a deep mark on the hearts of listeners, letting them know that fortitude is passed down through generations. Meanwhile, at the Resistance headquarters, Henry Collins and the technicians continued to work on improving the communications and surveillance system. They upgraded old radios, connected additional cameras and sensors to be able to quickly respond to any threat. Every new signal, every coordinate was recorded and analyzed to prevent a repeat of the chaos that had recently struck the city. Henry, with the air of a man who had lived through more than one war, said, "We cannot rest on our laurels. As long as evil exists, our work will never end. But we can do everything to ensure that our city never forgets that its people are its greatest strength." Archie, watching this process, was reminded of his past, of how he had once held a position alone, how his shots had decided battles. But now he knew that his experience was needed not only for shooting, but also for teaching, for passing on knowledge that saved lives. He visited training grounds where classes were held on marksmanship, tactics, and basic self-defense. In every classroom, in every group, he saw faces full of determination, but sometimes uncertainty, as young men faced the reality of war for the first time. "We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past," he said, "and we cannot allow fear to rule our lives. Only together, acting as one, can we create a future where there is no room for violence." Archie stood in the shadow of an old oak tree, watching the scene carefully. His heart, full of memories of the past, was filled with quiet joy as he saw his city slowly but surely returning to life. He understood that there was still much work ahead. It was necessary to strengthen the defense, educate the youth, develop the infrastructure, and most importantly, preserve the fortitude that allowed them to survive the attack. "Our city is our family," he thought, "and I will not allow anyone to take our soul from us." In these thoughts he found comfort and determination, because he knew that as long as there are people ready to defend their homeland, evil will never win. And so it was that another day passed in Rocky Bluff, a day when after the bloody clashes on the deserted roads the town began to find new life, when each citizen understood that even in the darkest of times there was hope if we stuck together. Old sniper Archie Hamilton continued on his way, passing on his experience and wisdom to those who were just beginning to learn the value of freedom and honor. His gaze, filled with the depth of his years, spoke of the fact that the struggle never ends, and that true strength lies in the unity of people united by a common goal, to protect their home. As evening fell and the golden light of the setting sun faded into the dark shadows, the people of Craggy Rock gathered in the central square to reaffirm their resolve. They lit candles, left messages on the walls, and promised never to forget that their strength lay in their unity. Henry Collins, who stood with Archie, looked at the old man and said quietly but firmly, "Our future is in our hands, and we will build it anew, brick by brick, building walls that the enemy cannot tear down." These words were the final chord of a day filled with toil, struggle, and hope. Over the course of the days, the people of Rocky Crag began to communicate with each other, patrols were organized, defenses were strengthened, and local volunteers and veterans, inspired by Archie's example, came together to confront the new wave of threats. But the calm of the night proved deceptive. Even as the town seemed to breathe calmly, a new shadow was quietly gaining strength in the deserted alleys and abandoned roads. A shadow that promised to bring not only fear, but also destruction back to Rocky Crag. Archie, having exchanged operational messages with Henry Collins and other resistance leaders, decided it was time to conduct a personal reconnaissance of the areas where strange signals and suspicious activity had been previously recorded. He put on the battered leather jacket he had once worn with pride and walked out of the house, clutching tightly the rifle he had learned would perform well even under the most extreme conditions. His steps, though not fast, were sure and steady. Every movement, every breath reflecting years of discipline and experience gained on the battlefield. The deserted road leading to the outskirts of town seemed endless. A light wind carried dust and small debris, and in the distance the silhouettes of abandoned buildings left over from the last century flickered. Archie drove slowly, allowing himself to observe everything around him. His gaze caught the smallest details: tire tracks, barely noticeable footprints, remnants of some small objects scattered along the side of the road. All this indicated that someone had recently passed here, and perhaps the enemy was preparing a new attack. He stopped the pickup at a large boulder that seemed to have stood guard over the road since time immemorial, and got out, leaning against the cold surface of the rock. Here, in the silence of the desert, he squatted down and took out an old notebook, a faithful companion where he recorded tactical observations, and began to take notes. The road was winding and difficult to navigate. Here, on the border between the city and the desert, nature seemed harsh and merciless. Every tree, every rock had witnessed many stories, and now they were mute observers of a new battle. Archie rode with his eyes on the gun, his mind focused on catching any sign of the enemy. Images from his service floated into his mind, when every minute could mean the difference between life and death, when a cold calculation and a well-aimed shot could save the life of an entire division. Now, despite the gray hair and fatigue, his instincts were as sharp as in the best of times. Soon, something strange caught his attention. On the side of the road, he found several metal fragments, clearly discarded in a hurry, and nearby, the remains of some kind of equipment, possibly parts of bikers' motorcycles. He carefully examined the scene, taking notes and photographs of the finds on his mobile device. His analytical mind understood that these small details could indicate that the enemy had changed its route or encountered an unexpected obstacle. All this data came together, and Archie knew that right now, in the silence of the desert, his experience could play a decisive role. As the truck slowly moved further down the narrow road, Archie noticed a group of bikers begin to stop in a small ravine at the base of a cliff. He approached, staying in the shadows, using his scope to try to make out faces and details, and then he saw one of the group's leaders, a middle-aged man with noticeable scars and a firm posture, clearly giving orders to his men. His confident gesture and cold gaze were a sign that this group had a clear target. Archie quickly snapped a few pictures, wrote down the coordinates, and relayed the information via encrypted communication to Henry Collins, who was back at headquarters. "Henry," he whispered into the microphone, "we have a group in sight. They're clearly regrouping at the ravine. One of them is a key figure. Take action as best you can." As night approached and darkness deepened, and the enemy began to slowly retreat, Archie decided it was time to return to town with the information he had gathered. His truck, now filled with data, slowly made its way back along the same winding road. Inside the car, he continued to analyze the information he had received, comparing it with the maps and notes he had collected over the years. His eyes were fixed on the future, where Rocky Crag, despite all its trials, would regain its calm and become a fortress for all its inhabitants. Back in the city, Archie headed straight to the Resistance headquarters, located in the basement of an old warehouse. There, in the semi-darkness, where the lamps cast a soft glow on yellowed maps and documents, he reported his observations to Henry Collins. A tense silence reigned in the room, broken only by the sounds of technicians analyzing data from surveillance cameras and mobile devices. Archie explained, "We have received information about the enemy regrouping in the ravine. Their leader apparently is responsible for coordinating strikes in the eastern part of the city. If we can delay them now, we can prevent a possible new attack." His words, spoken with sincere determination, made those present understand that every signal collected was another chance to protect their home city. A lively discussion about the next steps followed. The headquarters discussed the possibility of setting up hidden ambushes in areas where biker activity had been detected and setting up additional patrols for surveillance. Henry suggested using old radios that were left over from the service and connecting them to the new system to ensure 24/7 monitoring. The enemy, in his opinion, should not be able to regroup unnoticed. The technicians worked hard to set up the equipment, checking every cable line, every sensor, to prevent information leaks. In the distance, the muffled sounds of engines could be heard. The bikers were apparently regrouping after the unsuccessful strike, and their teams, weakened and confused, were trying to regain their lost self-confidence. But at the heart of the resistance, fervor was already boiling. Everyone knew that the enemy would not stop until they achieved their goal. Archie, checking the received data, contacted Henry again and said, "Information indicates that the enemy is planning to strike in the morning hours. We need to strengthen the defenses to the east and prepare hidden ambushes." His voice was firm and confident, as if he already saw the future in which Rocky Crag remains free and undefeated. As the first rays of dawn broke through the darkness of the night, the city was preparing for a new day in which fate depended on every action, on every minute. In the resistance headquarters, the latest amendments to the defense plans were discussed, tasks were distributed among the groups, and each participant felt that today a lot would be decided. Archie, realizing that his duty would never end, looked again at the old photographs and documents hanging on the walls of the headquarters, a reminder that his life was dedicated to the struggle for freedom and honor. He said quietly, "We will fight as long as our hearts beat, as long as our souls burn. Our city is our homeland, and I swear that I will defend it until my last breath." These words, filled with sincerity and unwavering determination, echoed throughout the headquarters. Night had fallen once more on Rocky Crag, and its darkness seemed to have grown deeper, more intense, as if the desert itself had decided to revive echoes of bygone times and awaken ancient memories in the hearts of the inhabitants. After the recent fierce clashes and the tense night in which the defenders of the town, led by Archie Hamilton, managed to repel the first attacks of the Bone Ravens, the time of quiet expectation was replaced by a new phase of struggle in which the fate of Rocky Crag once again hung in the balance. Archie, still holding his old rifle, stood on the ledge of the old stone wall that overlooked the entire central part of the town. His eyes, fixed on the distance, searched for even the slightest change in the dark alleys where the enemy might reassemble for another attack. Despite the gray hair, wrinkles, and fatigue accumulated over decades of service, his gaze remained coldly penetrating. In his soul, the same inextinguishable spark continued to burn, which in his youth had made him the best sniper, and now was turning into a living symbol of the courage and experience necessary to defend his native land. In the resistance headquarters, located in the basement of an old warehouse, the atmosphere was tense. Henry Collins, along with technicians and veterans, continued to work on improving the surveillance system so that every minute could be used to anticipate enemy movements. On old, yellowed maps of craggy rock, marked with red markers, they carefully monitored all signals received from external sensors and mobile devices. Each new incoming signal, each message over an encrypted channel became important threads in a complex network that should give the defenders the opportunity to prevent the enemy from striking again. At that moment, Henry received a report that suspicious movements had been spotted in the western part of town, near an old abandoned farm. The men sent to investigate confirmed that a small group of bikers might be regrouping for another attack. An immediate mission was organized, and Henry assigned one of the experienced men to conduct a meeting with local informants to gather as much information as possible. "We cannot allow the enemy to operate unnoticed," he said. "Every signal, every little thing can be decisive." Archie, having received the updated information, knew that the situation was becoming more and more tense. He left the headquarters and headed towards the northern part of the town, where, according to the transmitted data, traces of enemy activity were noticed. Along the way, his gaze met the faces of the inhabitants, who, although frightened, tried to remain calm. Some greeted him with a nod, some quietly whispered words of gratitude for the fact that the old man still stood guard over their hometown. These moments filled Archie with confidence. His duty, his experience, his endless devotion to this place were not in vain. Driving along a dusty road, Archie slowly approached the remote outskirts, where old barns and abandoned buildings seemed to hold secrets of the past. His pickup, covered in a layer of dust and memories, hummed steadily, as if trying to remind him that even old cars can be loyal allies in the most difficult conditions. He stopped at a huge wooden barn, long abandoned, where, according to locals, strange lights can sometimes be seen and unclear sounds heard. Here, among the creaking boards and musty air, Archie decided to conduct reconnaissance, a place that could become both an enemy lair and a refuge for allies. A few minutes later, his device began to hiss. Henry Collins reported that biker activity had been detected to the west, a few kilometers from the barn. The information was detailed: coordinates, numbers of people, even a description of their clothing and behavior. Archie, having carefully studied the data, realized that the enemy was about to regroup in order to strike again. His heart began to beat faster, and he knew that the time for silent observation was coming to an end. Decisive action would soon be necessary. Back in the truck, he quickly punched in the coordinates on the GPS and headed to the new location where the enemy was reported to be gathering. The road was winding, and the dust rose high into the air, creating an atmosphere of an ancient desert where every second seemed an eternity. Archie drove as if his car were part of the land itself, carrying the history and fate of generations. His thoughts flowed smoothly but decisively. He knew that it was his duty to prevent evil from engulfing his hometown again. As they approached the designated area, where an eerie silence reigned against the backdrop of abandoned buildings surrounded by barbed wire and abandoned vehicles, Archie prepared for action. He knew that his task was to gather as much information as possible, perhaps to carry out a surgical strike that would signal the defenders, but most importantly to warn headquarters of a possible turn of events. Standing on the side of the road, he carefully aimed his gun, trying to discern the smallest details in the darkness. His eyes adjusted to the weak light, and he made out how a group of bikers, with an obvious command element, gathered near one of the old warehouses. This man, with a cold and calculating gaze, seemed to be the center of their attention. At that crucial moment, Archie made a decision. He must not only gather information, but if the opportunity presented itself, he must strike a blow that would destabilize the enemy. His hand tightened on the butt of his rifle, and choosing his moment carefully, he fired a shot aimed squarely at the target. One of the leaders, who he calculated was responsible for coordinating the attack. The shot, distinct in the stillness of the night, made the enemy freeze. His instincts told him that this was the turning point. If the leader was eliminated, the enemy would lose coordination, and their attack could be thwarted. The gunshot echoed across the deserted landscape, and for a few seconds everything was silent. Then, like a wave, the enemy's anxious voices spread over the radio. People could be heard regrouping in panic, and then, moments later, the message that the leader had been defeated spread across the channels. Archie knew that his shot had sent a signal to the entire defense system of Rocky Crag. He did not hesitate. He immediately contacted Henry and reported what had happened, passing on all the coordinates and details of the operation. The return to headquarters was swift. Archie, still in combat mode, got into the pickup truck and sped along the winding road back to the city. His thoughts were full of determination and confidence. Every collected signal, every shot became a part of a great victory that was supposed to eventually return peace and order to his hometown. Upon arrival at headquarters, where the work of technical specialists and operational groups was already in full swing, he immediately reported on the results of the reconnaissance and the shot, which, according to him, destabilized the enemy's plans. As the night slowly gave way to a new day, and the first rays of dawn illuminated the ruined but still resilient streets of Rocky Bluff, headquarters received a message from one of the outposts. The enemy, having regrouped, was planning a new attack in the morning hours. Henry ordered immediate increased patrols to the east and the activation of all backup communication channels so that every signal, every whisper could be received and processed in time. At this point, Archie, feeling a new surge of fighting spirit, turned to the assembled fighters and said, "Our fight goes on. We have already proven that we can repel attacks, but the enemy will try to return. Today we must be ready for any turn of fate. Be careful, act together, and remember, our city, our honor, our freedom are worth any sacrifice." These words echoed throughout the headquarters, a call to action that raised the morale of all present. Young fighters, veterans, and locals united into a single force, understanding that only together could they resist the evil that was once again trying to infiltrate their hometown. Each of them knew that as long as Archie's heart beat, as long as his shots repelled evil, Rocky Bluff would stand firm. Thus ended Chapter 6, a night of anxious suspense, scouting, and decisive action that left not only scars on the streets, but also new hope in the hearts of the defenders. Archie Hamilton, an old man with an unquenchable spirit, had proven that even in the darkest hours there was light and strength to fight. His shots and words became a symbol of eternal determination, reminding all that freedom and honor demand constant vigilance and unity. The sky above Rocky Crag, once shrouded in the darkness of night, was slowly giving way to the first light of morning. But this dawn was different from all the others. There was a special energy in the cold, pre-dawn air, as if the desert itself was about to take up the cause of defending its homeland. After a night of intense scouting, fighting for control of the outskirts, and Archie's pinpoint shots, the townspeople waited for the decisive day when Rocky Crag's fate would be finally determined. The old sniper, still a symbol of courage and indomitable spirit, sat on the ledge of an abandoned barn that had become his temporary observation post. Before him was a vast view of the deserted expanse, where rock formations stood like ancient sentinels, guarding the forgotten history of this land. Archie was in no hurry to rise. He knew that every second of the coming day would be decisive, and every move of the enemy must be noted. His experience told him that the battle that was about to break out would not be a simple clash of forces, but a truly epic confrontation, where not only lives but also the future of his hometown would be at stake. The Resistance headquarters, located in the basement of an old warehouse, was bustling with activity. Henry Collins, now somewhat gray but determined, was working with technicians and veterans to finalize new defense plans. The walls of the warehouse were covered with maps, route charts, and hasty notes from previous clashes. Every new signal coming in from mobile devices and surveillance cameras was analyzed as if the life of the town itself was at stake. At that moment, there was a knock at the warehouse door. A new group of volunteers had arrived. Among them were young people, full of enthusiasm and a desire to prove their loyalty to their hometown, as well as older residents who remembered the old days and believed that Rocky Cliff would never be conquered. Archie, meeting their gaze, nodded, as if conveying a silent promise. "We will not give up." His words, unspoken, found a response in the hearts of everyone present. The new information demanded immediate action. Henry ordered a task force to be assembled and dispatched to the old mill, a location that was believed to be a hub in the enemy's network of movements. At that moment, the headquarters buzzed with voices discussing the latest data and adjusting patrol routes. Technicians were already plugging in the latest updates to the surveillance system, ensuring that every inch of the area was under surveillance. There was a tense energy in the air, mixed with quiet determination and memories of past battles. Archie, feeling that his duty required immediate attention, left the headquarters. He walked slowly toward the exit, where an old pickup truck was waiting for him, parked under an old acacia tree whose spreading branches seemed to protect everything that was dear to this place. His movements were smooth and measured, but in each step there was a determination proven by years of service. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and the pickup, as if animated by the spirit of the past, moved off along the winding road leading north. Soon his attention was drawn to a group of men moving slowly near an old mill, ravaged by time and neglect. They moved in a group, their silhouettes blending into the shadows of the old buildings, and it seemed that their presence was almost ghostly. Archie gripped the steering wheel tightly and turned on the radio, relaying information to headquarters. "I have captured a group near the mill. They may be regrouping. Watch closely. One of them is the commander. He has a distinctive scar on his right cheek." His voice was quiet, but everyone listening could hear the confidence in it, the confidence that came from years of experience and countless battles. Within minutes, Henry's radio came through. "Confirm. We have a group of about 10 men in sight. They are approaching the northern line." At that moment, a lively discussion began at headquarters, as operatives discussed how best to use this information to prevent another enemy attack. Henry, with cold precision, ordered a small mobile team to carry out an ambush. "We need to hold them off until the main force arrives," he said. "If we can take this commander, the enemy will lose coordination and their attack will be disrupted." Archie, having received confirmation, knew that the moment was crucial. He quietly switched to another channel and gave instructions to the group that was already on its way to the mill. Then, remaining at the peak of his observation skills, he returned to his car and continued along the winding road until his eyes caught movement. Now a large group of bikers who seemed to be regrouping after the loss of their leader. His heart fluttered with tension. He wanted to see how their efforts would not be in vain, how even one shot could change the course of events. His radio crackled softly, Henry's voice reporting that the patrol had already held off several bikers at the old mill and that the enemy seemed to be regrouping on the western flank. Archie nodded to himself, though no one could see him, his experience telling him that the enemy was now truly vulnerable. He said quietly, "If they try to strike, let them know we're ready." His words, not spoken loudly, became his inner vow, a promise that he would not allow evil to return to his hometown. Over the next few hours, Archie continued to observe, record, analyze, and transmit data to headquarters. His camera captured every moving object, and his notebook filled with new entries. Coordinates, directions, enemy numbers, their uniforms, and even the smallest details, All of this turned into invaluable information for further operational actions. His eyes, although tired, sought out every change, every detail, to use it later in the fight for the future of Rocky Crag. At that crucial moment, as the night approached its peak and the desert held its breath, Archie felt something shift inside him, as if a spark had been reignited in his soul, giving him the strength to act with implacable determination. He knew that his shots, his observations, his endless devotion to this place could be the deciding factors in the battle that was only just beginning. "We cannot let our city fall," he repeated quietly to himself. "Every shot, every second counts." His words became his prayer, his testament, which he transmitted through every detail, through every transmitted coordinate, through every signal coming from external sensors. Archie nodded, sighing heavily and smiling slightly. He knew that this fight was not the end, but only the beginning of a long journey, where every signal, every detail would matter. At headquarters, the operatives immediately began to redistribute forces, organize new patrols, and install additional sensors so that the enemy could not catch them off guard again. Every person, from the young fighters to the seasoned veterans, knew Rocky Crag is their home, and they will defend it until their last breath. In the headquarters hall, where old maps and photographs now formed the basis for new plans, Archie stepped forward again and addressed the assembled men. "We have come through the storm, and today our city is not only standing, it is alive. But the enemy will not stop while we are in danger. It is our duty to be prepared, to keep our ears open, and to waste no time. Each of us is a brick in the wall we are building to protect Rocky Bluff from all threats. Let us be vigilant, let us stand together, and then no evil will be able to destroy our strength." His words echoed around the hall, eliciting approving nods and determined looks. The young fighters listened attentively, remembering every word, and the veterans, who had been through fire and water, found in it a reminder of their destiny. The sky above Rocky Bluff seemed to be shattered into 1,000 shades at that moment, from deep blue to soft pink, as the first rays of dawn began to penetrate the clouds, giving the desert an almost mystical atmosphere. Despite the grim events of the last few days, when the city had been under threat and the night patrols carried the anxious echo of the battle, at this hour of dawn the inhabitants once again felt the power of a new beginning. But along with the morning light, there was in the air not only the reliable aroma of coffee and freshly picked dew, but also a smoldering flame of determination that did not allow one to forget that night when the old sniper Archie gathered all his wisdom and experience to protect his native land. "Archie," Henry said, looking into his tired but determined eyes, "we have received word that the enemy is trying to penetrate through the abandoned old farmsteads on the east side of town again. We must strengthen our defenses in that direction, or they will be able to wash over us like a wave." Archie nodded, his voice, quiet but filled with iron determination, cutting through the silence. "We already know that our enemies are not random bandits, but an organized force that seeks to seize every inch of our land. If we are to defend Craggy Rock, we must act with the precision we did when every second mattered. Let each of us know that we will stand to the last, for our strength lies in our unity." These words spread throughout the headquarters, filling the souls of the fighters with an unquenchable fire. It was decided to send 2 mobile groups. The first, under the command of Henry, was to strengthen the eastern line of defense and install additional surveillance sensors along the abandoned roads leading to the old farms. The second group, more mobile and operational, went to the west, where, according to the latest signals, the enemy was going to regroup near the ruins of the old mill. Archie, realizing that his experience in reconnaissance and accurate shooting could still play a decisive role, personally led the group to collect information along the eastern front. On the road, Archie drove through deserted spaces, where every tree, every rock seemed to be silent witnesses of 1,000-year-old stories. His pickup, covered in a layer of dust and memories, hummed quietly, as if trying to remind him that even old equipment can become a reliable ally. He stopped at a small asphalt area where the first signs of enemy activity had already been noticed. Fresh tire tracks, the remains of discarded wreckage of equipment, even tiny footprints leading towards an abandoned farm. Archie pulled out his notebook, began to carefully record every detail: time, direction, size, and features of the prints. His hand did not tremble. Years of service taught him that it is often in the little things that the key to understanding the enemy's intentions is hidden. Watching this, Archie remembered his younger days, when every morning began with tension, and every shot could decide the fate of hundreds of people. His mind, honed by years of service, went over his memories with a slight sadness and great pride, about those who fell in battle, about those whose names remained forever in his memory, about the friends with whom he fought side by side. He knew that his duty was not just to fight, but also to pass on his experience to the younger generation, so that they could continue to defend their native land, even when his own body could no longer withstand battles as before. At headquarters, where Henry and the technicians continued to work on improving the surveillance system, the tension reached new heights. Each new piece of information, each coordinate transmitted from the Eastern Line, caused a lively discussion. The technicians compared the received data with previous records, trying to find patterns in the enemy's movements. Henry, listening attentively to the reports, said, "It seems the enemy is trying to act according to a pre-planned scenario. If we can identify their algorithm, we can predict their next move." His voice, full of confidence and experience, inspired hope that even the most cunning enemy plans could be exposed. Meanwhile, Archie, still on the Eastern Line, continued to watch. His eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the slightest changes, from the flickering lights in the distance to the change in direction of a group of bikers. He felt an unquenchable fire burning within him, and his mind, filled with experience and determination, clearly saw that the enemy was not going to retreat. His inner voice quietly repeated, "We must be ready. We must protect our home. Each of us is a defender, and in unity we are strong." The hours ticked by, and over the next few hours the tension on the Eastern Line gradually grew. Archie, still in the thick of things, watched as the enemy group seemed to be trying to organize a new strategy. He switched the night vision mode on his scope again and began recording every step. His camera worked continuously, recording even the smallest details, from movements in the shadows to the quiet rustling of the enemy's clothing. Every second was worth its weight in gold. Every detail could be key in the upcoming battle. Suddenly, while Archie was recording another movement of bikers, his attention was drawn to one particularly sharp signal, as if someone was trying to transmit a secret message through light signals, using the reflections from the remains of old equipment. The signal was short but clear, and Archie, instantly realizing that this could be the coordinates for a new attack, immediately documented it. He passed the information to headquarters, and soon Henry confirmed, "Received, Archie. The enemy may be planning an attack in this area. Increase surveillance and prepare an ambush." Archie felt a surge of adrenaline again, remembering his best days, when every minute of the battle was decisive. His hand did not tremble, and he knew that his experience and determination were what could give him a chance to win even in the most difficult conditions. At this crucial moment, Archie realized that his duty was not only to observe, but to act. He decided that if the situation got out of hand, he was ready to fire one last shot that would be the turning point for the enemy. His thoughts, filled with memories of the past and hope for the future, focused on how important it was for each of the defenders to understand that freedom and honor required sacrifice, and that even one man, if he acted with true determination, could change the course of events. Over the next few hours, as the city prepared for another round of fighting, Archie continued to watch the Eastern Line. He saw how the enemy group, weakened by previous attacks and regroupings, was trying to regain its fighting ability. His eyes, accustomed to the smallest details, recorded their every move, every change in formation. He knew that victory would depend on the precision and timing of his actions, on whether he could transmit the right information and, if necessary, strike decisively. When the time came for the first wave of the enemy's new attack, the final orders were given at headquarters. Patrols were reinforced, defensive lines were strengthened, and all the men were given instructions on how to act in the event of a sudden contact. Henry, with cold determination, said, "We will not allow the enemy to gain the upper hand. If they try to break through, our response will be lightning fast. Every second is important. Every detail is our shield. Be ready." These words, filled with endless experience and faith, awakened in the hearts of the men a determination comparable to that which accompanied the great heroes of the past. Archie, watching the scene unfold through his ration screen, felt his heart fill with energy once more. His eyes gleamed with determination as he watched the defenders of the city work together as if every minute was a new opportunity to prove their strength. He knew that this day's battle could ultimately determine the fate of Rocky Crag, and that his observations and precise shots could be the deciding factor in stopping the enemy onslaught. Tension grew with each passing minute. Information coming from the eastern line confirmed that the enemy was attempting to concentrate its forces for a decisive strike. Henry ordered more patrols, and technicians continued to record every enemy move with cameras and sensors. Archie, meanwhile, received a new signal. An enemy group, weakened by previous strikes, was about to make a surprise maneuver to outflank the defenses. His instincts, honed over the years, instantly kicked in. He realized that this could be a trap designed to catch the defenders off guard. Without wasting a moment, Archie was back out in the field. He climbed into his truck and, keeping his eyes glued to the horizon, headed toward the area where the enemy was reportedly preparing their next attack. The wind-blown dust hid much, but Archie's experience allowed him to discern the smallest changes. He noticed a group of bikers slowly forming up alongside an abandoned building, trying to camouflage their movement. His heart began to beat faster. He knew this could be a turning point. He quietly contacted Henry and said, "I'm seeing movement near the old warehouse. They'll be attacking soon. Be prepared to strike back." His voice, calm but determined, echoed over the radio, forcing the defenders to pay close attention to every signal. In the hours that followed, the battle reached its climax. Fierce clashes broke out in the streets of Rocky Bluff as resistance fighters armed not only with modern weapons, but also with ancient traditions passed down through generations stood against groups of bikers who tried to break through the lines. The sounds of gunfire, shouts, the roar of engines, and clear orders merged into a single symphony of battle in which every move mattered. Young fighters, inspired by the examples of veterans, fought with fire in their eyes, while the old men, sitting at bedside tables in the headquarters, watched the events unfold, knowing that it was their duty to defend their hometown until their last breath. When the enemy, having regrouped after previous losses, tried to strike again, all the forces of the defenders of Rocky Cliff united into a single line of defense. Every second of the battle was filled with adrenaline and determination, and every shot was a sign that the freedom and honor of this city were worth any sacrifice. People united in resistance felt that their city was not just a place on the map, but a living being that needed to be protected, defended, and loved. At that moment, Archie once again spoke his words, which became a testament to all present. "As long as our heart beats, Rocky Cliff will not fall. We are the guardians of this land, and no evil can destroy our strength if we are united." These words, spoken with incredible strength and sincerity, echoed throughout the entire line of defense, causing a feeling of invincibility and determination in the hearts of the fighters. Night turned to morning, and despite the fatigue and scars of recent battles, the city was gradually coming to its senses. The resistance headquarters worked tirelessly. Every signal, every coordinate was recorded for further analysis, and the defenders prepared for a new day, knowing that the enemy could still try to return. Archie, sitting on the balcony of his house, looked at the rising sun and quietly thought about how the fight for freedom is an endless process that requires courage, faith, and unity. His soul, filled with memories of the past and hope for the future, burned like a flame that will never go out. The resistance headquarters, located in the basement of an old warehouse, was a tense place. Henry Collins, technicians, veterans, and local activists were hard at work improving surveillance and patrol coordination. Maps covered with small notes and route charts hung on the walls, and every new signal from the sensors was recorded and analyzed immediately. The latest news indicated that the Bone Ravens were gathering forces again for a new offensive on the eastern side of town. It was here that intelligence indicated that the enemy planned to use the old rural roads for a surprise assault. Henry, studying the data intently, said, "Our information indicates that the enemy is planning an attack through the eastern flank. We need to increase patrols and prepare an ambush. Every minute counts." Archie, having heard the orders through the encrypted channel, stood up and walked slowly to the table where old photographs and letters from local meetings were laid out. His gaze fell on the picture of a young soldier, one of his own during his service. Memories flooded him. He saw the faces of his fallen comrades, heard the screams and explosions, remembered how every moment could have been his last. But now he knew. His experience and courage must become a bulwark for new defenders. His voice, quiet but heartfelt, rang out. We cannot allow the enemy to prevail again. Every second counts. We are the heirs of those who fought for this city, and we must pass on their spirit to the next generation. It is our duty to defend our home, and today we will show that Rocky Bluff will not surrender without a fight. At that moment, outside the headquarters, Archie climbed behind the wheel of his old pickup truck, which had become a symbol of reliability and loyalty, and drove along the dusty roads leading to the eastern outskirts of town. The road was winding and difficult to navigate, the dust rising high into the air, obscuring the smallest details of the terrain. Archie watched every change carefully. His eyes, hardened by years of service, discerned tire tracks, footprints, and even subtle signs of enemy presence. He stopped at an old farm surrounded by abandoned buildings and thickets of brush, where, according to his information, the enemy might regroup. In this place where time seemed to stand still, Archie stepped out of the truck and began to make a careful inspection. He moved slowly across the dusty floor, his hand steady as he pulled out a pad and pencil to record every detail. His thoughts went back to his days as a young sniper, when every minute mattered, when his intuition was sharper than any instrument. He recorded the size of the tracks, the direction they moved, even the smallest differences in the texture of the ground. His mind worked at incredible speed, analyzing, correlating, comparing with previous data to find patterns in the enemy's actions. Suddenly, a quiet sound was heard behind him, footsteps approaching from the depths of the abandoned building. Archie instantly assumed a fighting stance, covering himself behind a massive wooden table that had once been used to store old tools. He slowly raised his rifle, pointed it toward the source of the sound, and began to watch. Outlines flashed in the darkness. It was one of the bikers, clearly a scout trying to survey the area. His figure, barely discernible in the semi-darkness, left Archie in no doubt. The enemy was here, and he was already planning something serious. Archie's old hand, experienced and unbreakable, did not waver as he took a well-aimed shot. The shot, breaking the silence of the night, echoed across the desert, and at the same moment he heard a signal come in on the radio. "Henry, I confirm. Intelligence indicates that the enemy is in this area. One of them is probably leading the group." Archie, clutching the rifle, said quietly, "Signal received. This is our chance to disrupt their plans. Hold your positions and prepare for another maneuver." His voice, filled with cold determination, became the very call that spread through the communication channels, raising the fighting spirit of all the fighters located in the headquarters. A lively discussion began at the resistance headquarters. Technicians analyzed data, fighters exchanged information, and Henry, the leader of the entire operation, gave orders honed by years of experience. "We must use every chance to disrupt their regrouping," he said. "If we can delay the commanders, the enemy will lose coordination and our defense will become impenetrable." His voice sounded with such confidence that even the most hesitant fighters understood that now everything depended on the unity and precision of each action. Archie, returning to his cover, knew that his shot had already been decisive. It had given a signal that could change the course of the battle. His mind was full of memories of the past, of how precision alone could save lives, and of his duty to pass on this wisdom to the new defenders. He continued to record information, taking notes and transmitting them to headquarters via mobile device, without taking his eyes off the enemy's every tiny movement. Archie's words resonated with the young fighters. They listened as if every word he said was the key to understanding how to protect their lives and their homeland. Their gazes, full of determination and respect, met his wise eyes, and in that moment it seemed as if time really stood still, and the past and the future merged into one. Meanwhile, tension was rising at headquarters as the task force approached the eastern front, where signals indicated the enemy was attempting to regroup for another attack. Henry gave the order, "All forces, be ready. If the enemy tries to break through, fire back at them, and let every shot be like lightning, destroying their plans." His voice echoed through the communications channels, instilling a sense of determination and combat readiness in every soldier. Time ticked by, and as dawn broke over the desert, Archie, still in the thick of things, continued to observe and record. His camera, set to night mode, captured every detail, from distant lights to changes in enemy movement. He relayed the information in real time, his voice steady and calm, a reminder that every second mattered. "We're about to be hit again," he said quietly. Hang in there, men. Our city is our life, and we must protect it at all costs. After this decisive shot, Henry radioed, "Report received. Enemy commander down. East line stabilized." These words echoed throughout the headquarters, causing cheers from the men, their spirits lifted, and their confidence in victory growing stronger with each passing minute. As the night slowly gave way to dawn, and in that transitional moment when Rocky Bluff was beginning to take on new life, Archie couldn't help but look back and remember how many years had passed since he first stood up to defend his homeland. His soul was filled with the bitterness of loss, but also with endless gratitude for every moment when his shots saved lives. He understood that his duty was not only to fight, but also to teach, to pass on his experience to those who would continue this eternal battle for freedom. Back at headquarters, where plans for the hours ahead had already been drawn up, Henry and the technicians began organizing new patrol routes, installing additional sensors, and updating defense plans. Every little detail, every signal mattered, and Archie, sitting at his desk, listened to the discussions as if every sentence were part of a grand plan that could protect his hometown from any onslaught. As dawn broke and sunlight filled every corner of the town, headquarters received the final message. The enemy, regrouped after their losses, was ready for a new attack, but now the defenders of Rocky Bluff were ready. Henry ordered the main body to move forward, and Archie, as a symbol of unwavering determination, took aim again and prepared to fire the final decisive shot if necessary. His hands, worn by age but still strong, held the rifle with the same precision as in his youth. At that crucial moment when everyone present at headquarters felt that the fate of the town was hanging by a thread, Archie uttered his last words, full of wisdom and fire. "We will fight until our last breath. Our town is our family, our land, and we will not allow anyone to destroy it. As long as the heart beats, as long as the light burns in our souls, Rocky Bluff will stand." These words, spoken with deep confidence, became the final call that echoed throughout the headquarters and the streets of the city, instilling in the fighters and citizens an unshakable faith in their victory. As the night finally gave way to the first timid light of dawn, Rocky Crag awoke from a long sleep filled with the bitterness of recent battles and heavy thoughts about the future. The deserted spaces, where time seemed frozen in the endless sands, were now beginning to fill with life, hope, and determination. In the center of the city, where the sounds of battle once thundered, now the first barely distinguishable voices of the inhabitants were heard, gathering together to rebuild their home. But even in this moment of calm, there was a sense of uncertainty, for the evil that clutched the city in its cruel claws could not disappear forever. In the resistance headquarters, located in an old warehouse basement, the walls were covered with maps and diagrams covered in small print, where each line marked a strategic route and each mark a potential threat. Henry carefully analyzed the latest data received from sensors, video cameras, and mobile devices, recording every enemy move. "The eastern line of defense is almost completely fortified," he said, "but the enemy is going to regroup and may try another attack near the abandoned farm. We must be ready for anything." His voice, stern and confident, echoed throughout the room, reminding everyone that every second counted. At that moment, Archie, having received updated information, went out onto the streets again. His pickup, covered in a layer of dust and memories, moved slowly along the winding road leading towards the eastern outskirts, where the enemy was trying to gather for a new offensive at the signal. Every turn, every bump in the road echoed in his memory those days when he himself, as a young sniper, stood guard over the lives of his comrades. Now his task was different: to protect his hometown, to pass on his experience to new defenders, and to prove that even in the hardest battle, hope can be reborn. The road was difficult, the sand rising high and the wind blowing the dust relentlessly, obscuring the smallest details. Archie scanned the surrounding landscape, every curve, every shadow seeming to him like possible traces of the enemy. He stopped at a small hill with a magnificent view of the surrounding area. Here, among the forgotten ruins and overgrown bushes, he saw a group moving in the distance. Their silhouettes, barely visible in the pre-dawn light, carried the same fierce determination that was familiar to anyone who had fought for freedom. He quickly adjusted the scope, took several pictures, and transmitted the data to headquarters via an encrypted channel. "Henry, I have a group at 45.6789, -112.3456. They are clearly regrouping. One of them is clearly the leader. Stay ready." His voice was calm, but there was determination in every word. As the sun began to rise higher, illuminating the abandoned buildings and dusty roads, headquarters received a new signal. In the eastern part of the city, the enemy apparently began to move in a group, trying to organize a new attack. Henry ordered increased patrols and prepared reserve units. "We must be ready for anything," he said. "If the enemy decides to attack, we will give them an answer from which they will not be able to recover." At this moment, the entire surveillance and communication system at headquarters worked at maximum efficiency. Every new detail was recorded and analyzed with incredible speed. Archie, watching the events unfold, felt his heart fill with an unquenchable fire. He understood that every second, every shot could be decisive in this fight for the freedom of his hometown. His thoughts returned to past battles, to those moments when his precision and determination saved lives when he was younger. But even then, he knew, freedom requires sacrifice. "We must show the enemy," he said quietly, "that this is no place for violence, that Rocky Bluff is a home that we will defend until our last breath." His words, quiet but full of power, sounded in his soul like a testament that was passed down from generation to generation. At this time, as the Eastern Line prepared for a new clash, the final preparations for a counterattack began at headquarters. Henry gave the command, "If the enemy tries to break through, bring them out into the open where we can make a pinpoint strike. Use every opportunity. Every signal is our chance." The technicians activated all the backup channels, and the fighters began to take up new positions where visibility and the possibility of hiding were minimal. Everyone in headquarters sensed that this was the decisive moment when their actions would determine the future of Rocky Bluff. Fierce clashes began in the streets. The bikers, led by the commander, desperately tried to break through the lines of defense, but were met with lightning-fast response from the defenders. Shots, clear orders, chaotic but coordinated movements of the fighters created a picture of a real battle where every moment was filled with adrenaline and determination. The smell of gunpowder and dust was in the air, and everyone who was on the battlefield understood. Today, everything depended on how well they could act together. Archie, remaining at the front line, gave precise instructions over the radio, recorded each new signal, and relayed the information to headquarters. His voice, filled with cold determination, sounded like an echo of past battles, when every second could save a life. "We are one," he said, "and as long as we stand together, the enemy cannot win. Every action, every second is our chance to show that freedom and honor are worth any sacrifice." His words inspired the fighters, making them feel that even in the darkest hour, light can be found if you work together. At that moment, the order from Henry was heard again at headquarters. "Contact confirmed. The enemy commander has been injured, and their group is beginning to retreat. Our response now is as fast and precise as possible. Be ready, soldiers. Time is of the essence." These words became the final call to action for all present, and like a waterfall, the resolve of the defenders poured out onto the streets of Rocky Cliff. Archie, watching the calm return, knew that the battle might be won, but the war for Rocky Bluff's freedom continued. His gaze, looking into the distance, was full of promise and hope. He knew that each new morning was a chance to begin again, a chance for the town and its people to find peace and unity if they stood together. His voice, quiet but sure, rang in his head. "As long as our hearts beat, as long as our wills remain unbroken, we are the defenders of this land. Our town will stand, and no one can destroy the strength that comes from unity and faith." Thus, Chapter 9 ends with the climax of a decisive battle, when Rocky Rock, despite the scars and losses, regains its strength and confidence. Archie Hamilton, with his long experience and unwavering determination, has proven that even in the darkest times, the light of courage can illuminate the path to victory. Every shot, every second spent in the struggle becomes part of a great story that will be passed down from generation to generation, reminding everyone that freedom and honor are worth any sacrifice. As the last glimmers of night gave way to the first light of morning, Rocky Crag prepared for a new day, full of hope, plans, and the certainty that evil could never completely overshadow the light if people stuck together. Henry and the other commanders continued to adjust plans, and technicians updated surveillance systems to make sure every minute was used with maximum efficiency. At this crucial moment, everyone understood that their fight was not just a battle for territory, but a battle for the soul of their homeland, for its history and its future. As the darkness of the night finally receded before the first rays of a new dawn, Rocky Cliff, exhausted and at the same time reborn by the past battles, awoke from a long sleep full of pain, loss, and unquenchable hope. The streets of the town, where the sounds of battles and cries of alarm were recently heard, now began to resound with the first steps of people gathering together to rebuild their home and fight back the evil that was trying to break into their lives again. Archie Hamilton, an old veteran with an unbroken spirit, sat on the porch of his old home, looking out over the deserted expanse and high cliffs. His face, lined with wrinkles and the marks of many battles he had endured, was calm and focused. His eyes reflected the light of dawn, a symbol of a new beginning. But at the same time, they contained a deep sadness for the losses and the pain of past victims. He knew that every minute, every day lived was a gift that could not be wasted, and his duty to the town and its people remained unchanged: to protect Rocky Bluff until his last breath, to pass on his experience to the younger generation, and not allow evil to overcome his native land again. The Resistance headquarters, located in the basement of an old warehouse, had an unusual atmosphere of calm expectation. Henry Collins, along with technicians and veterans, continued to adjust the surveillance system, updating route maps and analyzing the latest data from external sensors. The walls of the warehouse were covered with maps, notebooks, and photographs from past battles, each inscription here a reminder that freedom requires constant vigilance. Despite their fatigue, the fighters' faces shone with determination. They understood that even after the latest clashes, the battle was far from over, and their duty to protect their home city remained sacred. Meanwhile, the streets of Rocky Bluff were in full swing. Newly formed patrols, armed not only with modern technology but also with the knowledge of old veterans, moved through the streets, guarding every street, every intersection. Younger residents, inspired by Archie's example, came together to help rebuild destroyed homes, organize night shifts, and even conduct impromptu self-defense classes. Every detail, every movement, every voice became part of a larger, unified plan, a plan in which Rocky Bluff was once again becoming a fortress where evil had no chance. Archie, the living embodiment of courage and experience, decided to personally conduct a tour of key sections of the Eastern Defense Line. His pickup, covered in a layer of dust and memories, slowly sped along the winding roads, where every bend, every rock told of ancient times and great deeds. Along the way, he met groups of volunteers patrolling the streets, and in every look he saw a spark of determination. People greeted him with silent worship, knowing that his presence was a sign that the city was not lost, that its defense was still going on. The road led Archie to an abandoned farm that intelligence had indicated was a place where the enemy was planning to regroup. Here, among the rubble of old buildings, thickets of wild brush, and rusty farm machinery, he saw signs of activity, fresh tire tracks, footprints in the dust, and even small pieces of machinery scattered about. Archie slowly stepped out of the truck and, crouching on the cold ground, began to record every detail. His hand was steady and experienced as he wrote down the information, and his gaze, determined, missed no detail. Every detail suggested that the enemy had been here recently, that they were trying to regroup, and perhaps planning another attack.